Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Chair Yellen. It's good to see you. I listened intently to your testimony and your commentary on the headwinds to our economy that I think all of us follow very closely. It has a direct impact on all of our constituents. But I didn't hear you comment on a couple of issues that concern me. Last year, there were 81,000 pages of new regulation. Since 2009 to 2015, there were 550,000 new pages of regulation. Would you consider that a headwind for economic growth?
You're referring to our regulations?
No, I'm talking about government regulation across the spectrum. I hope you don't have 550,000 new pages of regulation at the Fed, but
I don't think we do.
No, I don't think you do either.
We do have
a lot.
regulations. We certainly do. You know, the regulations that have been put in effect generally are intended to address problems.
Are these headwinds to the economy or not?
It's very hard to quantify the extent to which regulation is a headwind.
But it would be a headwind?
Businesses certainly cite regulation as a factor affecting their decision-making.
Then why don't you cite it? If the businesses that you talk to cite this as a headwind, why don't you cite it as a headwind?
Well, I actually don't think it's the most important headwind. It may be a headwind, but... Okay.
And how about the U.S. corporate tax rate, 39.1%. The OECD average of a corporate tax rate is 24.1%. We pay 15% more in corporate taxes. That's 15% less money that goes into wages and economic development, research and development. Do you see that as a headwind?
Well, I think it's widely agreed could be constructive changes to the corporate tax system.
I have an individual in Wisconsin, that's where I'm from, who has a manufacturing facility. He manufactures in Wisconsin and has facilities all over the country. And most manufacturers in his industry, they've all left America. They've all gone overseas. He's one of the few that are left. And he talks about per employee. He spends $15,000 a year per employee on insurance and $20,000 per employee in regulatory compliance. So $35,000 goes out the door per employee before he pays them 1 red cent in salary. Do you see that as a headwind?
Well, these tax arrangements do have impacts on the profitability of various business activities.
So you'd agree that would be a headwind?
Well,
or is that a benefit? Does that help him out? Does that help him grow jobs and salaries in his company? That $20,000 in regulatory compliance cost?
Well, different countries have different systems for dealing with health care and financing it, and the impacts are complicated.
I'll accept that as a non-answer. Want to change course a little bit. Looking back at the '08 crisis, you've been at the Fed for a while. Were there any banks that failed that had a leverage ratio of 10% or higher that you're aware of? So give me their names if you would.
I don't know, but I can tell you that a lot of banks that failed were considered to be well capitalized.
That's not my question, though.
They failed.
There's different definitions of well capitalized. Do you know if any one bank that had a leverage ratio of 10% or higher failed?
I do not know.
Because I've looked and I haven't found one in the '08 crisis that failed with a leverage ratio of 10% or higher. And so I think you're aware that this committee is talking about a reform to Dodd-Frank, and I know that you're aware that many banks complain about the cost of compliance and what that does for them to make loans that would be good loans and traditional loans that they could usually make that now they can't because of new regulation, which has an impact on our economy, economic growth, job creation. Do you oppose the idea that if you have a high leverage ratio, you hold good capital, that you can get out of some of the costly regulations that come from the Fed and other regulators?
Well, I do think that for community banks, it would be worthwhile to put in place a simplified capital regime. And the details I'm not certain of, but we're looking at this as well.
Do you agree there's a correlation, though, between more capital and less regulation? Can you buy into that concept?
I think for community banks, yes.
Because we're safer, right? We hold more capital, there's less risk to the economy.
For banks, for community banks, I think a simplified regime where there's less
Larger banks,
regulatory
the answer is
burden.
no?
I said for community
So is the
banks.
answer no for larger banks?
For systemically important banks, the answer is no.
My time is
Time of the gentleman.